Hi, Mrs. Shaw here for tonight's bedtime story, The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter, illustrated by Amy Rosenberg. The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, there lived 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in the sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out." And off Mama went. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little rabbits, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. He had a bellyache. But round the end of the cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out 4 young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was almost dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten his way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have gotten away altogether if he had not unfortunately got caught into the gooseberry net by his large buttons on his new jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself to get out. Exert means to put extra special work into something. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve which he intended to pop upon Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into the can. It would have been a beautiful place to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden under the flower pots. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each one. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Achoo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out the window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least way to which way to go. After a time he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over some doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer him. She only shook her head, and Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his watering cans. A white cat sat staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He heard about cats from his cousin Benjamin Bunny. He went back toward the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of the hoe. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch. Mr. McGregor's in his garden, working nearby. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes. He presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned toward Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him in the corner. Oh dear, is he going to catch him? But Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and Peter's shoes for a scarecrow in his garden to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home in the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the sand of the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in the fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made him some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. Here comes Peter Cottontail, hopping down the bunny trail. Hippity hoppity, happy Easter day. Sleep well, boys and girls. Good night.